Now we're going to look at exactly what a deconstruction appraisal is, how it compares to other appraisals for personal property like art, collectibles, and look at what a client should look for in their appraisal report. So it's similar in that we're looking at the secondary market, which is where these used building materials and appliances fixtures are sold, which means these are being sold used. We look at the local market as well as the national market. Sometimes the microeconomic area will have a higher sales value for one type of material over another part of geographic area in the United States. We find the comparable sales, evaluate the data, compare and contrast to the subject piece being appraised, and make value adjustments. So it's the same valuation methodology. If you are appraising a Van Gogh owl jug versus a Kohler toilet, we're looking at comparable sales of similar assets on the secondary market. We're looking for fair market value. So that's the value that the IRS strictly defines: willing buyer, willing seller, no compulsion, both knowledgeable of the facts, adequate exposure time. So the difference is that in a lot of ways, these deconstruction appraisals are much easier than fine art because we are valuing a lot of fungible material. Interior doors that are 6-panel may end up being 50 of them, and we're valuing one door. A very high volume of items. The other things we look at are the condition, and this is critical. So the condition of appliances, are they functioning? Ensure that wood is not damaged and is not reusable. We also rely heavily on the deconstruction contractors that we work with and trust to make sure that they're only extracting the material that can be reused. And then that nonprofit looks at that inventory of what was donated, and they align everything that they received. They only include what was in good reusable condition, and that is the list off of which we create our appraisal. So there's auction sales, which if we're looking at that Van Gogh owl jug, for example, there's auction sales, there's galleries, there's secondary retailers. We also have, as deconstruction appraisers, there's also secondary retail outlets. There's huge ones that are tens of thousands of square feet, and then they're of various space around the country. And then there's also very small places, some that sell right off the back of their truck on site at deconstruction. So part of our job is ensuring that we have a pulse on that market. We study what the other deconstruction contractors and nonprofits are selling the material for, the firm offer prices, and we document that sometimes by actually going into the retailers, taking pictures of the inventory from time to time and cataloging it on our side. This methodology that we use, like any appraiser or any business valuator, is time intensive, and the margins on it are not huge because it takes a lot of work from our team. It usually takes us about, from start to finish, anywhere from a month and a half to 2 months. And this must be done this way. There's 2 tax court cases that we'll get to that have dictated how we need to do this, and they're specific to deconstruction. Prior to our entrance into the market in 2019, a lot of appraisers were using something that they called the cost approach, or using software like RS Means, and which is software that's used by PEs often for cost segregation analyses. And we review those reports all the time when we're looking at assets in our tax practice that have a cost segregation analysis done. But it was not ever meant to be a replacement for the comparable sales approach for deconstructed material. So what would happen, and as those 2 tax courts show, there were volume of materials plugged in for a 2,000 square foot home. Depreciation was arbitrarily assigned, and in a matter of maybe under 5 minutes, an entire valuation report was created. So people weren't all that excited, to say the least, about our entrance into the market when we came and brought the appraiser knowledge that I've gained through my education through all 3 of those appraisal organizations, my accreditation, as well as my 26 years as a CPA. And we applied that rigor and that detail to deconstruction appraisals, and have required, others in the marketplace who offer these are now using the sales comparison approach, which that is great. And I'm glad that we had that effect. I'm sorry for them that their margins went down precipitously once you had to do all of this work. So we have a literal description of the asset. This shows how a door would be described. This presents a comparable sale. This is an older slide, but let's say this was done in 2020. It shows what it sold for. Then there's adjustments to value if it's in worse condition, or if it has more features that would increase the value. You reconcile the value and you land on a final concluded value. So here's a correct presentation of an example of a Wolf cooktop. This is what it would look like in a compliant appraisal report. And then this is the incorrect presentation. When an IRS examiner gets an appraisal report like this, they have nothing to go off of. We need to show our work, and we need to write in accessible reports that are ready for the IRS or an examiner to look through and add credibility to the values that we are assigning. These are the tax court cases, Mann v. US, and then there was an appeal that was lost on that case, Laub v. Commissioner. And what is important about Laub is that they were able to disallow the entire donation on a technicality under DEFRA compliance. So you miss a box on the 8283, they don't even have to dig into whether the appraisal is compliant or not. They can disallow it on a technicality. Albrecht v. Commissioner was really important as well. It was another, they disallowed the entire donation on a technicality that was the fault of the nonprofit. So a CWA, the contemporaneous written acknowledgement, there's an IRS website, which I can email, and I have articles written ad nauseum about this on our website. But this CWA technicality means that a nonprofit has to have these 6 bullet points in their CWA. I often, on my tax side, when I'm working with my nonprofit clients, copy and paste. Make sure that CWA is compliant, or you could put your donee's entire donation at risk for disallowance. This is another opinion from a CPA on the Mann case. It was such a big deal that in the CPA community, it really rippled through, and a lot of my colleagues on the tax side, it left a bad taste in their mouth about deconstruction and potential the disallowance of these donations, which is all the more reason to do the work that we do to shore this up so that we can keep this tax deduction available as a tool to move towards deconstruction and away from demolition. Here's a little bit more on the Laub v. Commissioner, and we have these slides available as well online.